So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our beautiful viewers around the globe, and thank you all for joining us. And today's guest on Intimate Conversation is a beautiful Pat Armistead, and we are going to have a great conversation as usual. Now, Pat, you are one of the world's first joyologists, is that correct?
The world's first.
The world's first. That is so cool. We're going to get you to talk all about all that all in a minute. But at this moment, I'll just introduce you a wee bit. So Pat is a transforming workplace wellbeing facilitator, and she helps with the healing of trauma and grief. She is also a public speaker and will do speaking and talks around presence, mental health, workplace wellbeing, conscious leadership, and emotional intelligence and creativity. So Pat also is a multi-award-winning keynote speaker and facilitator, author, and coach. She is Speaker of the Year for the NSANZ, which is what, Pat? What is that?
That's the National Speakers Association of New Zealand.
Oh, beautiful.
It's actually got a fresh name now, but when I was living over there, yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. So that's the highest award for any speaker in New Zealand. That's absolutely amazing. So congratulations on that. And yes, let's get into this conversation. So Pat, first of all, I always like to sort of see whether whoever the guest is, whether you were awake when you were a child, as in conscious awake. What was your childhood like? Like, where did you come into knowing more about yourself, and like, how did that all go?
I think I was, to an extent, probably from maybe about the age of, well, actually, when I was younger, I had an invisible friend.
Yes.
Who was there for several years, disappeared when I was about 8. And then from that period on, probably through to high school, when I was not at school, my total absorption was in the world of make-believe. So creativity, huge dress-up box, and I've got many photos of myself and the dog in the backyard.
I mean, you can see that in you now, like today, the way I love it. Yeah, great.
So, whether, like there weren't any particular events as such, but I really am. I remember my dad got a brand new Holden, and we all went out for a drive in this brand new Holden, and I can remember that trip and Mum being exasperated because there was probably myself and my next sister down. We're about 5 years apart, but there had to be room on the back seat for my friend, and Mum was just beside herself, irritable. So there was those little interludes.
Yeah.
And when I think about them now, it's like, where did that friend go? And what part of my higher self is that presence?
Yes.
Presence. And how do we? I think that was schooled out of me.
Right. Yeah. And possibly, I'd say definitely, probably. And so do you remember the character of that friend? Like, have you got a character that you can remember from that time with that friend, and can you sort of marry it up in a sense now with yourself, that aspect?
Yeah, certainly impish and playful.
Yeah.
The like a little dancing spirit, just kind of a bouncing spirit, just
joyful,
never still.
Yeah, cool. That's really lovely.
and the, you know, I have two other sisters, and we're all 5 years apart, and so there was a long period of, you know, not having any other ones to play with in those early years. And I so see her appearance and her contribution to my creative wellspring.
Right.
And this is just thinking about it now, reflecting back, and the huge influence that she had, because all those years playing in the backyard, dress up box, just me or me and the dog, and I didn't need anything else.
Yeah.
And part of my journey through to now, even this last 2 or 3 years, has been to really just keep achieving more and more of that place of equanimity.
Yes.
To be able to rise above, not be buffeted by the storm, and to, freely bring forth that wisdom now. I'm really claiming the elder space.
Beautiful.
This last 12 months or so. And over the years, so many people have said to me, oh, you know, you can't do and be all of those things. Well, actually, I have.
Yes.
And the way in which at different times that has stymied me, pushed me down, had me go cave in response to that. But the perfect breeding ground, if you like, for my alter ego has always been doubting Thomas. So overcoming self-doubt has been a huge part of my personal journey. And next year, probably, I will complete this. I'm going to write a book called When Doubting Thomas Meets Enduring Faith. And, you know, that's an incredible journey.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm only now really starting to own it.
Beautiful.
You know, I have an old coach who used to say to me, Pat, you don't own your greatness. Not owning it, you know, and I really get that. I couldn't. And now with when the last Joyology is now 21, and the last 21 years have been a huge personal journey. And, you know, I resolve whatever comes up now, I'm going to go to it. And not particularly well equipped way back at the turn of the century. However, skills and different trainings, modalities, learning, just reading and exploring have supported me to find a place now where challenge and support present themselves side by side. Prior to that, there would have been a bit of a gap. And now, and this was since the turn of the century, it's like challenge, oh, look. And paradox and synchronicity, the same.
Yeah.
And that's really, I love Wayne Dyer's book, The Power of Intention. And when those phenomena became really apparent to me, I really got, right, so just set an intention, and not an intention to do something, just set the intention.
Yes.
And when you step out, all manner of things come. And we can talk about a couple of those.
They do.
Yes.
Yeah, they do. And I get that, challenge support thing. And I think now I've noticed myself, there's so much more support for me personally now than there ever was. And I think we come to a place where we, because Spirit, I used to do the doubting thing too, Pat. And honestly, I'd had so many clients throughout time over life, telling me how accurate I've been in the readings with them and, those sorts of things. And I would still doubt. I'd still doubt it all. I'd think, oh God, here's another reading, we might get into it, and I'd be questioning something that was coming through, and I'd say, get out of there, just give it to them. And and eventually, of course, I always did, and I always checked before. But it was that place where all of a sudden I thought, why am I still doubting myself?
Yeah.
Why is that? And Spirit said to me in that moment, yes, just stop. And I thought, well, that's easier said than done. But what I did was I noticed every time I was doing it, and I just sort of denounce it, really. I just, no, not doing that anymore. I know that I'm okay in this, So, yeah, it takes a little bit. I mean, you just do all these things till you don't, do you? Don't. But the support is definitely, and that's that new, I think, anyway, I feel like it's our new world that we're creating more of that. There's more unification, there's more harmony, more of the support and the love that we've been sort of not really getting in big ways over the last lifetimes.
Yeah.
It's definitely changed. It's lovely. It's so nice.
I remember in 2020, you would know Daring Donna.
Yes.
Daring Donna hosted New Zealand's first and only Be the Change conference. She had 17 speakers and 300 people arrive for a dawn ceremony in this outdoor venue. And we had this magnificent ceremony, and we're still all standing in this huge circle, and things are just quietening down from all the opening rituals, and everyone's waiting to be led to the next, right, where do we go now?
Yep.
And there was just silence. And then people started going, do you know what's happening? What's going to happen next? To the person next to them. And they're going, oh, I don't know. And then finally Donna spoke and revealed that there was indeed, she had 17 speakers, but there was no agenda. And that the day would just unfold. And for, I don't know how many people left at that point, but a lot left because they just couldn't be with, well, what do you mean there's no agenda?
Free flow.
So the day unfolded, it went through till 9 or 10 p.m. I was one of those speakers, and look, I probably spoke 15, 20 times. And it was just like, things moving in, things moving out, things moving in, moving out. All right, just these pockets of just totally intuitively guided. And I really saw then there were so many spirit workers in New Zealand who I felt were very tentative in their practices and their marketing. And I think that event heralded a wake up for all of us. Beautiful. On that day. There were two, what do we call them? Two scientists there, but there's a word for them. Can't think of their title. It might come to me. Two scientists there anyway, who had been mapping the energy of New Zealand in 3 locations for 30 or 40 years. And they showed us the illustrations of what those energy fields looked like in each of those areas. And the beginning images were very basic, squares, 5-sided, not much dimension in the portrayal of the, the images. And then passage of time to come to then back to 2020, and just these extraordinary, multifaceted energy fields of great beauty. And I really saw it at that time. It's like, oh yes, the unfolding and the things I didn't know. Right? Here it is taking shape, getting form. What appeared to be just a box now has become this thing of great beauty. And I kind of used that for us. And there was great argument back then, and stemming, squashing down of natural therapy, natural practices, natural medicines were all being interfered with.
Right.
And it was, I think it just heralded, in order for all of these things to come through at another level, each of those people and others needed to step into their full strength, give full expression
Yes.
to who they were and who they were going to be. And on that day, Donna gave me permission to really explore joyology, because I'd been given this message and I didn't know what it was going to be, because there'd never been one. So it was a real pioneering thing. And it was requiring of me to be fully self-expressed, which is something I've always sought, and to do it in the face of no agreement. I belong to the National Speakers Association. Everyone there wears a suit and, a tie if they're a man, and there's a certain standard of dress. And much of the feedback I got at that time, I had a signature hat that I wore.
Yes, I remember.
People would say to me, "Hat, you're never going to get any corporate work with that hat or those fingernails." And it was difficult, but, I delivered into health, which I knew because I used to be a registered nurse, and then transitioned after a period to business. And, it was a lot of phone calls.
Yeah.
But, the receptionist who'd answer the phone would go, "Did you say you were a joyologist? Oh, I need some of that around here."
Right.
And it began at the desk.
Right. And how, so it was something that sort of just shot in, Pat, like, this is what I'm doing. It was, a creative download.
Yep. Before, I lived in New Zealand for just over 20 years. Before that, I was living in New South Wales. I had my partner, and for 11 years, we had a video production company.
Mm-hmm.
Just before the turn of the century, there was a bit of a downturn in the economy. I created a few initiatives that tided us through that time. But my partner, who was from New Zealand, he was a bit cup half full. He wanted to go home.
Right.
To New Zealand, and I hadn't really had a plan for that, but I surrendered. My family hadn't been talking since 1989, so it felt like there was no soft place to land here.
Yeah.
And his family were over there, so maybe we would just do that for a time. So relocated over there, and over a 4-year period around that time, earlier in my life, I had lost my first child, a daughter. I lost my home and business twice, moved to New Zealand owing 80,000, which I repaid in 2 years.
Wow.
I'm going to write a little book about that.
That's great.
Because I could have declared bankruptcy and it might have been easier,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't want that, the stigma, I guess, of that.
Yes, I understand.
And it was all part of this emerging me that, whatever's coming up, I created it. It wasn't a bad thing.
No.
If we hadn't had the downturn, we'd have been hunky-dory. We just would have been progressing through. So, taking... I rang while I was in New Zealand over that period, repaying that money. I rang my bank manager back over here every Friday till it was done.
Wow.
And he would say to me, "Pat," he said, "we don't like what's happened." He said, "But," he said, I can set my watch by you. I know you're going to ring at whatever time." And so I think I learned a deep level of commitment. I'm going to face it. I'm going to be my word.
Yeah.
And at 3 o'clock or whatever time it was, that's my thing. And I'm going to tell him, "Today I'm sending you X amount."
Yeah.
So I had that. The first 18 months that I was in New Zealand, I had 10 car accidents, none my fault.
Wow. Wow.
Exactly. 9 times I got hit up the back at a stop sign. And the last time I got wiped out in a roundabout. I had some crash karma going on then. And in hindsight, you know, the universe was telling me, oh, you get it? Oh, no. All right. Now do you get it? Just extraordinary.
Yeah.
But even then, there was something happening. A1 Auto Wreckers in Auckland, the owner of that business has since died. But after about the third accident, he would send the tow truck for my car, and he personally would come and take me wherever I was heading that day. And I was astounded. And he said to me, Pat, my accountant said to me, mate, you look after the customers like customers in this arena have never been looked after before, and I'll look after your money.
Wow.
So he came about 6 or 7 times and picked me up from these accidents and took me on forward. So we get messages sometimes and they're not always clear. So at the end of that 2-year period, having repaid the money, my ex found another woman. And after about 6 months, he left with her. And his parting words were, no, I don't love you. And I never loved you. Now, we'd been together 20 years, and I thought we would grow old and crotchety in a rest home.
Oh, wow.
And that didn't happen. And
that would have been a shock.
I was devastated. It was like all the other stuff was just physical, and we can sort it. You know, car gets fixed, eventually repaid the money. But this was something else. And I thought at the time, if what he said is true, then everything I've ever known is not true. And so I disintegrated.
Yeah.
And from that disintegration, my doctor wanted to medicate me because I was pretty distressed for a time. And I said, no, I have every right to be feeling sad in and of this moment, you know. And she wasn't the answer. So I found another doctor, that was Dr. Robbie Kelly, whom you would be aware of, I'm sure. And I went to a grieving seminar at Starship Hospital, and there were 400 parents there who had lost children. Big area. And the person who was presenting was a doctor from the USA who had worked with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the grieving end-of-life lady. And he was there to help these parents create their own networks once they left the embrace of Starship. So I'm sitting in the front row because that's what I do. And I sat next to a couple who were the beginning of this next stage of my life, really. A man and a wife, man and his wife. The man was sitting immediately on my left. The woman just sat totally unexpressive and bolt upright with her hands on her knees for the whole 2 hours of the seminar. She never moved. He, on the other hand, hugged himself and he rocked backwards and forwards. I could see the muscles in his face clenching and unclenching. Every now and again, tears would come to his eyes. And 20 years nursing, I saw a lot of stuff. But this man, I felt this man's pain like I had felt no one else's pain ever before. At the end of the seminar, he went outside and I followed him. And I said, you know, clearly you've had a recent loss, would you like to talk? And he shared the story. His son had fallen in the IMAX cinema and died as a result of that fall, just an accident. He said, you can see where my wife is. She's not here anymore. I've got 2 children at home. I'm a bloke. I don't know what to do with all of this. And we had this amazing long conversation and a hug, and both went our ways. When I went home that night, there was an email from a magician in South Australia inviting me to bring laughter yoga to New Zealand. I'm like, what? So I get on the phone. It was, still would have been a reasonable hour over here. And I'm talking to this man, Peter Salerno, the magician, and he's telling me about laughter yoga, which I was not familiar with. And I'm laughing my head off, and he's not telling me any jokes.
Right.
Yeah. And then there's this little lull in the conversation. And I was really present to, I have just left this room with 400 parents in untold grief. 400. And now I'm on the phone to a magician, and I'm in this other space. And it was like I saw and felt this barometer of emotion, the full range of expression.
Yeah.
And in that quiet moment, no conversation. It was one of those, not an awkward moment, just a quiet moment. And I got a message, and the message was, oh my God, we've got radiology, pathology, hematology, but no joyology. You're going to be a joyologist.
Oh,
So there it was.
so beautiful.
Unreal,
Yeah.
It's a day. It's
Yeah.
like extraordinary. And, I really get now it may not be in the future, but up until now, it is the adversity we encounter and how we manage it that gives us this next layer of access.
Yes.
There's something that we can't necessarily always describe well, but it gives us, for me, access is the best word.
Yes.
So
That's so right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So after leaving Peter Salerno in that conversation, because I agreed I'd come over and learn laughter yoga, which I did. And then I came back, and I was a bit like a dog with a bone, because, all right, you've given me this message, which is great, thank you. But what am I going to do with it? And what is it? So I decided, all right, Pat, you need to get clever. Stop worrying, get clever. So I had a friend who owned several rest homes, and I said to her, look, I have no idea how this might work, but I'd like to come in every day for 90 days and teach your staff and residents laughter yoga, and see if we can measure in some way anyway the effects. So we did that. And the Anne-Marie Rest Home in Blockhouse Bay in Auckland became New Zealand's first accredited laughter home,
Wow.
which deserves a round of applause.
Yes.
They went on to achieve a world record in the Guinness Book of Records for laughing continuously for 1 hour. And
Wow.
I had them do that in rounders, because if they all did it all together for that length,
Yes. Yeah.
not good. And in that time space, they started taking the mickey out of their infirmity. They'd pass each other in the corridor on their walkers and do silly ho ho ha 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 things as they passed. They would pick up each other's laundry, put it in their little trolley on their walking frames, and they'd bring whatever they undies, let's say Sundays, the big ladies' bloomers, and they'd take it to lunch, and they'd fold the bloomers up like this and say, "Whose are these?" So I got in that period, these were people 60 to 105 who was a great rest home. Nothing wrong with the rest home, but who had become passive recipients of whatever you want to do to me. And they took their power back such as they could.
Beautiful.
So that 90 days was in a period where I was still grieving. I would often drive there and I'd be crying. I'd tidy myself up in the car park and go in, and there were two ladies who waited for me every morning, Christina and Joan, and 83-year-old spinsters, and they were deaf. So you know how deaf people, older people, often talk louder. I would hear them as I approached the front door, and they'd be saying, I wonder what she's got on today. I wonder what hat she'll be wearing today. And there was my joy.
Oh.
Those 29 residents held no judgment over who I was.
Yes. Yes.
They just loved me for who walked in.
Yeah.
You know, there was nothing. Whereas much of my other world, speaker associates, family not talking, partners left, it was like bereft of all of those who I felt so close to. And yet these 29 residents showed me the way out of that, or one part of the way of that, being out of that place of pain. The very first workshop that I did, an elderly man in the room got up and came forward and said, Pat, that was wonderful. He was 98 and his partner was 97. His name was Stan and her name was Glad. He said, Pat, that was just wonderful. What fun. He said, have you met Glad? And I'm like, no, I haven't actually met anyone personally yet. So he takes me, as men of that era do, by, you know how they escort you under the elbow?
Yeah.
So he's escorting me under the elbow to Glad. And we're just stepping forward. It's only, 10 steps away. And he turned to me and he said, Pat, hasn't Glad got beautiful eyes?
No.
And in that moment, I thought, if I get to be his age, I don't know how old he was then, but if I get to be this age and my fella still thinks I've got beautiful eyes, I'm one happy little chick.
Yeah.
I put my arm around Stan's shoulder and leaned in to say hello to Glad. Glad, who had been mute for 2 years, said, take your hands off my husband.
Really? Wow.
What a classic.
That is such a classic. Oh, wow.
So, staff later told me, don't be fooled by Glad. Stan was still living at home on his own. She was a resident, and she said, Stan visits every day at 1:30. Woe betide for Stan if he comes at 1:35, because her toe will be tapping, her fingers will be tapping, and there'll be no hand holding in front of the TV that day.
Oh, wow. How beautiful. That's
So-
such a beautiful story.
There were so many things about my own and their humanity that came through in that period. At the end, I talked to the owner and I said, I'd like to do another pilot, this one 12 months long. I want to assess your residents and staff for their multiple intelligence, and I want to create the most extensive and varied activities program in the Southern Hemisphere. And so off we went and did indeed achieve that. And what came through for me was, it doesn't matter that these people are 60 through to 105. What I'm doing for them, I can do for these.
Yes.
And I really got, that period was about bringing through my life experiences, my nursing experiences, practices, knowledge, to start to meld and craft what might end up being joyology. And the first 18 months was tricky.
Yeah.
Tricky. But I just kept going.
Yes. Yeah, well, you do, don't you? Because you know that this is like, that message came in, yes, but in here you would have known that, yeah, okay, that's something I can feel is supposed to be in play somewhere. How we never know how. But yeah, always get shown the steps, and it's beautiful how they turn up, isn't it? Those little breadcrumbs that show us where to go. Do they still do that in the rest homes? Have you taught any others? Like, is it a program that can be set up like franchised?
There are I don't do a lot of laughter yoga now. I still incorporate it in presentations that I give, but I don't devote myself to it. There are, I don't know how many, but there's a number of laughter yoga trainers in New Zealand, and there are certainly many over here in Australia and throughout the world. I'm told throughout the world there's over 5,000 laughter yoga leaders. So they're all, in my words, Clayton, yogic laughter is a bit like Clayton's. It's the drink you're having when you're not having a drink.
Yes, yeah.
So it's the fun you're having when you're not having fun. And the hugest gem, I think, that can come from it, and it's still to really be implemented, is for it to be delivered to people with mental health issues, challenges, and concerns.
Yes.
Because whether you're laughing for real, these mechanical laughter exercises, whether you're doing those or laughing for real, is a simplifying it, but the brain thinks, my God, I'm having a good time.
Yes.
And you're left with this lingering effect. So to answer your question, yes, there are people who will run it, and I'm not familiar now. I've been away from New Zealand 5 years, but over here, there's, especially since COVID, there's been a growing body of people committed to their own health and well-being. So
yes.
they've taken it on just for that, but also to be delivering into aged care in particular. Yes.
Right, because that's more the place I was meaning, is the rest homes and for the elderly. It'd be so good for them. My dad would have been right into that.
Yep.
He was always so funny. He had such a great sense of humor, and laughed a lot at himself over them. You know, we might not have thought some of them were funny, but he'd be cracking up thinking he was the funniest man on the planet. He would have loved it in the rest home. It was quite boring for him. Yeah. It's a lot of time just spent sitting on his own, you know, and all that sort of thing. Yeah. So it would have been great. He would have got right into it.
Yeah.
So wow. And you know, like, did you find being in New Zealand, the energy different to Australia? Like, can you define any of that type of, you know, a lot of like I see, you know, Australia, I've been over a few times, and there's always been something different. It's like, what is that? And then it was one day I just sort of thought, oh my gosh, it doesn't have the water element. Whereas New Zealand for me has all the elements, whereas Australia seemed to be, sort of just for me didn't have the water element. Yeah. And it was a different feel completely. Good though, but just different.
Yeah. When I moved across, I had visited numerous times in previous, and loved New Zealand, enjoyed it. And I thought there would be, you know, it's different to visit and then come and stay for a while.
Yeah, definitely.
I thought there would be, you know, many similarities, but as I was there longer and time passed, I saw there were many differences. And I think I was given this defining experience. I worked for 2 years out at Otahu in a private training provider. They were second chance learners in the school, computer training school. And when I first arrived, the attendance rates were 35% and so outcomes, so not good.
Yeah.
And they had processes for getting students into line. And one of them was this horrific letter that people get sent, which was just cutting. And I just decided, I'm not signing that. I'm not sending that. That's not going to enrol anybody. So I refused. And instead, I went into the classrooms and started to get to know the students. And I started writing everyone a one-page letter, celebrating, honouring, congratulating where they were at, even if it was only 12 words a minute so far.
Yeah.
And over the 2 years that I was there, I sent over 2,000 pieces of what I now call glad mail, one-page letters, all of them. And the attendance rate was 85%, and so were outcomes. And I really got connected to, I'd been doing it in the past, but not in such a dedicated way. It's like all my life I've been catching people doing something right, but look at what happens when I really focus on that.
Yes.
I had 12 staff, and their comment at the first meeting I had with the staff was, you can't teach these people anything.
Right.
So there we are.
Yeah.
We're done. And the staff had no budget allocated to their ongoing training. And I orchestrated that everyone, there were 100 staff, that everyone got $1,000 a year towards their ongoing education. And so, I started to see, because this was all merged, right? I've got that job because I'm paying off the 80 grand, so I've got to have.
Yeah.
And when I first spoke to the owner, she said, "Were you in here the other day?" I said, "Yes, I was." And she said, "Well, we told you we didn't have any jobs." I said, "Yes, I know, but, I'm just popping in." She said, "And besides," she said, "I've never employed an Australian." And I don't know where this came from, but I said, "Well, today might be the day." And she laughed her head off and said, "Come into the boardroom," and I got a job.
Oh, good on you.
I've always had this spirit, if you like, but even then, there were the car accidents happening and other stuff.
Wow.
So even then, this greater spirit was coming through. I mean, I didn't see it in that window at that time.
Yes.
But there was this big spirit emerging.
Yeah. Beautiful. And it is, you do look back over your life and you see those moments like that where, yes, that step forward and took the lead for a moment, it's great stuff. So, Pat, you do a lot of creative. There's in this recording, when we put the recording out, there'll be your some of your art that you've done, and for people to see. And you have got a very, very creative imagination. Like you're very. I remember the first few times that I saw you, met you. I don't know I think we've met personally, but in expos and things, and you had your hat on and your velvet coat, and you were flying around there, and it was so lovely. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, who is that lady? And there was just this energy with you of joy. Totally, you were in your element. You were loving people, and they were loving you, and it was really lovely to see. So that creative energy, obviously very much as the child, like you were explaining with your dress up and all of that. And now you paint a bit, don't you? You do lots of different things.
In 2004, two things happened. I toured with Patch Adams through Russia's orphanages for 16 days in Clown with 36 other people.
That would have been incredible.
And it was amazing. One of the most extraordinary things in my life. And there's one little story, we could talk about that in a minute. The other thing that happened was I worked for that year with 4 Jungian psychotherapists, and we met as a result of an interest in the casting, body casting process. So casting hands, body parts in plaster of Paris and getting a mould. And so we met monthly and we shared myths, legends, fairy tales, colour, symbolism, all that we each knew across that whole realm. And we cast each other just in relation to where we felt energy was stored for about something for that time. It was really to engender the experience, not so much the healing, although there was some.
Yes. Yeah.
And so we ended up with all these pieces and then this incredible amount of information. And at the end of that time, the idea just came very quickly. I'm going to create a good grief program to really shift how we view grief. Because I think as a society, we have become death phobic and grief illiterate. And
we've become what? Sorry?
Death phobic.
Death phobic, right, yes. Yeah.
And grief illiterate. People don't understand grief. Grief is not just when we lose a partner or a parent or a child.
No.
There are all the rebuttals, all the backhanders, all the disappointments, all the left downs. They all create grief.
Yes, they do.
Some of these slaps that we get in life, some are big and they create a large hole, and others are smaller.
Yeah.
But they all create a gap. And that's a gap between the reality that we want and the reality that we actually have.
Yeah.
And when we do deep work around that, it's been my experience, over that 12 months working with those Jungian therapists, I discovered my own inner body in a way that I hadn't before. I got access. And I've always been a storyteller. Yep. But I just got access to another level of my capacity. So I began these programs and very quickly discovered most people don't want to do this level of deep work, Pat. The people who were arriving were so not up for it.
Yeah.
And I persevered for about a year and I thought, oh, look, I just need to be content with it's only ever going to be, or for now anyway, boutique. So settle with that. So I would run it about 6 times a year, up to about 12 people, and usually a 3-day process. And it's totally, Angela Dixon.
Yes.
Angela put all the music together for me for those 3 days in sequence. We had a long conversation. So it's totally choreographed to music, some of which they can hear on this plane, and other segments where I'm playing it, but it's not audible.
Right. Yes.
And so they're led through these 3 days. So there's an initial sharing of stories from the people around the room. As that occurs, I get to see and hear where the pain is stored for each of those people. I help them determine which body part we would then cast. I teach them how to do the casting, and then they cast each other. So we've got this, I ended up calling it profound intimacy with the physical being of human form.
Right, yeah.
To be this close and touch in the face of someone else's deep, deep pain is profound. And to share every emotion that arises in that space is just incredible, incredible. And so people make their cast, and then some of the cast, I've done the artwork, some of the participants have done. So they're given a lot of guidance and pulling that together, sort of a lot of activities that help in the after. So we have a ceremony then with their cast pieces, not having art made of it, and then come back and begin that creative process. And what I've seen happen now over time, so 2004 through to now, my own appreciation of the depth of healing. As we've done the storytelling, we've created that safe, high trust space, we've created the intimacy. So you've got that into me, you see. And then we do the casting, which is a different process. And then the cast is removed, and it doesn't just pop off, right? You need to ease your way out of the cast, especially if it's a torso and over the breasts or anything. And you don't do it with big physical movement. You need to work from within, like a snake shedding the skin.
Right.
So you ease yourself out of the cast. If you do, like if your hands are being cast, then the plaster will get cracks and the piece won't be any good. So people, it doesn't take much to get, by the time we get to that part, people know how to do it. And once they start feeling it lift, because it does, then, and what I'm appreciating now is, oh my goodness, as that is lifting away, so is everything that needs to be released. And the last client that I worked with in New Zealand, she had discovered that her long-term partner had been sexually abusing her 4 boys. So when they revealed to her, she removed them, reported him. He was arrested and subsequently jailed. And over a 6-week window, she was in a good enough financial position to get another house and get the boys safe and get things sorted. And when she found me, her friends and people around her were saying, oh, we're so worried about you. You're too good. So we met and had a conversation, and she shared that with me. And I knew in that first meeting, you have already come to a place of forgiveness and compassion.
Right.
And for me, that was new. I've never seen that level of elevation happen in such a very short window of time. It's not that she wasn't still going to grieve. Of course she was. However, she had reached this position. So she signed up for the program. And as it turned out, she was the only participant that time. So I still proceeded. So, and I also had, for the first time for me, someone helping me, having my back.
Yes.
So I have this woman having my back, supporting me in this experience with this client. And we cast her whole torso from the tip of her ears down to her pubic area. So a big piece. And as we were removing it, easing her out of, because it's got many folds and things we need to be careful with. As it released from her body farted like I imagine a rhinoceros might. And that's when I really got the enormity of the work.
Right. Yes.
Right. As I've continued to surface and grow and be able to hold a better place as others are rising, then look at this extraordinary expression with the universe.
Yes, yes, that's what it is, isn't it?
Yes. Well, the 3 of us, we laughed and laughed and laughed. It was just
I bet.
so fun. I don't know if I shared with you this piece, but I'll send you a picture of the piece she crafted. After we'd taken that off and came to the process of decorating, she said to me, oh, could we cut a shape in the chest and could I make it like a book? And I immediately said, oh, no, it'd be too hard. And then I thought, Pat, stop it. And I said, rub that out. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah.
So we did.
Wow.
And all of this art is, I'm going to call it rude. You can do a casting process that is beautifully smooth and will show up every wrinkle and line of your body.
Mm-hmm.
But this process is not about that.
No.
This is about the intimacy between the two creating and the trust that the person puts in you to hold you gently, to hold them gently,
Yeah.
as you work with their wounded space, and to show beauty where it seems there's none.
Right. Yes.
And some of the things I would have sent you just demonstrate that. We start with a roll of 6-inch plaster Paris bandage and we end up with a creation that's profound.
Mm.
None of these people are artists.
Wow, beautiful.
You know, so being able to help people access that wellspring of creativity, they will continue to grieve.
Yes.
That's not it, but they're able to be with it.
Yes.
And
in a new way. That's probably, yeah. I mean, that would just offer so much for them. It's so beautiful.
I've seen, especially the last 3 years, people have lost touch with awe and wonder. You know, there's just so many other, so much separatism, division, anger, resentment, derision. It's all out there. And to look on another and see their beauty, that's been my intention since the turn of the century. You know, from my own wounded place. You know, my first mission, and it still holds, is I want to help people find joy where it seems there's none.
Yes, that's beautiful. Oh, what a wonderful thing you're doing, Pat, in this world. Honestly, and like you say now, I think, you know, I know for myself, helping people to come into that place of self-empowerment, you know, but also assisting those and holding space for those who are in deep trauma and grief and wounding. And you know, many times there's those tears of just gratitude that they've reached that place of surrendering to it and allowing it to move on somewhere else, you know, and integrate it in some way. And the change in their life that comes from that, like you say, you know, the access that comes in and what you can access from that when you do what you're deeply knowing is the right thing for you to do at the time. There's always these beautiful gold nuggets or you know, carrots that were dangled maybe on the way. You get that reward in there at that time, and it's just beautiful. And witnessing that change in somebody else's life like that you've helped and just held space for is absolutely it's so touching. So I can totally feel how that was in that moment with you and all of these people that you've been helping and assisting through time and space in their trauma. So what now, Pat? Like, what are you doing in this present time now? Is there new things unfolding in this? Because now, you know, we're coming, like we're saying, you know, there's so much over this last 3 years, it's kicked into this very big doomy, gloomy state, isn't there? And a lot of fear still running. And, you know, I see exactly that. And it's about bringing helping to bring that more in for people to see get them imagination back, creativity, open them to what next and what now. So what's now for you?
I began writing my book a couple of years ago and just did not get into flow around that happening. So writing my life story, but in particular the last 21, 22 years, and also I have an exhibition that I want to hold next year. It's called Mute Appeal, and it's to demonstrate to people the degree to which people can't give voice to what's within them, and the degree to which people don't want to hear what's really going on.
Yes.
Beautiful. It's called Mute Appeal. Triggered by a young fellow I worked with before I left New Zealand. At the height of he was 16, at the height of his emotional turmoil, he sutured his lips together.
Oh, wow.
And wrote this letter. So the letter was just, I'm choking up, was just heartbreaking to just hear in these written words the agony of his experience of life at that time.
Wow.
So well articulated, but he couldn't give voice to it. So I have a draft piece of that done, the cast face and the sutures, and there'll be 7 pieces altogether, and I want it to be, the launch will be a show. I will have models, all who will be painted a bit into the canvas, so that, like, I might have someone holding a canvas, so both their hands will be painted into it.
Yes, yes.
So as I tell each story of each piece of art, the model will disengage, and I want to talk people through that. So it's
Beautiful.
like the piece comes to life, and what's inanimate really gets seen.
Wow.
Or heard.
Yes, yes.
And that's as much for me as for anyone else.
Yeah.
Because all my life I've had this doubting thing. When I started delivering keynotes and things really kicked off, by about 2010, 11, 12, I had my radio show. It was just going great, winning awards, 40 or 50 speaking engagements a year. And this is not to show off. I have about 8 folders holding 5,000 endorsements.
Wow. That's amazing.
But I want to share with you today, it wasn't enough.
Right.
And my coach said to me, Pat Armistead, when will it ever, she swore actually, but she said, when will it ever be enough? And, that comment from her took me to another level. And while I never actively sought those, I did. Yeah. On a spirit level. And I'm so glad I kept them, because they're like a timeline, a visual track. They're witness of success.
Yes.
And the way in which because I showed up, they were able to express that. Yes. Yeah. And I think there's this, I call it raw authenticity. I remember once I arrived looking great. I've got the little sports car, I've got my urban turban, which was my signature hat, and giving this presentation, and I shared that I'd actually been living for 12 months in my overdraft. And my comment to the audience was, you think I'm looking good, but, no one of us at any time is ever got our whole circle of life totally fulfilled.
Yes.
And a woman came to me afterwards and she said, "You won't believe what you've done." She said, "I sat at the table with my family last night and we agreed we've done all we can. We're going to have to sell the house. But having heard your story," she said, "I'm going home and we're going to sit at the table again." And I heard from her about 6 weeks later. She rang and she said, "Pat, I want you to know we found a way." So, at whatever level, right? You don't have to be, Anthony Robbins in order to change a life.
No.
It's like every story that you have is begging to be released because someone needs to hear it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, there's the, excuse me, there was a point in time where I was sort of tired of story. It's like, I'm sick and tired of all the stories, story about this, shift that we're in now and this planet and that planet and all the different things that were going on. It was like, it just got too much. There was too much going in here. And yet recognizing too, people saying it's time to drop the stories, get out of the story, but yet those stories are, yes, who we are. They're who we've created ourselves into, and then we shift from them too. We're moving them all the time, and we're staying open to learning more and open to more experience, whatever that might be that we're wishing for or just plummeting into. But they're important. They're important parts. And I know, listening to my dad's story, listening to how, my mum's story, like, it gives you an understanding of where you've come from, what you've been brought up in, all of it's very, very relevant. We need the story to keep life in flow and keep life going, really. If we didn't have that, we wouldn't have anything, I don't think.
No. And, I've been talking a lot the last few years about transgenerational trauma, but I think what you're talking about just now, this is our willingness to, heal, move, shift and change, and be in that more flowing state, is creating the transgenerational healing.
Yes.
Because, what your father gifted you in his stories. So they're part of your consciousness now, and there'll be ways, physical and not physical, that will go on to influence others.
That's right.
And my life and experience with the performing arts has been a constant for 50 years. And when I toured with Patch Adams, I did 2 clown schools because I failed the first time and never did learn to juggle. I did improv acting. I did storytelling class at Auckland University. I went to the School of Philosophy for 6 months. It was a really intense year to prepare for this tour, to visit Russian orphanages in Moscow and St. Petersburg with a troop of people, 36, dressed as clowns, compassionate clowns. And I'd like to share one story from that.
Yep.
In Moscow, now the name escapes me, but it might come. We went to the Deaf, Dumb and Blind Centre, that's what it was called. And as we entered, a little girl in a blue velvet dress came towards me with her hand outstretched. So clearly this is where I'm meant to go in this visit. And she took my hand and led me into a room off the side, pulled me to sit on the floor beside her. And as that was happening, I was just filled with joy and light. I just this incredible anticipation, the likes of which I have not felt since.
Wow.
Just extraordinary. Just I could feel myself being filled up.
Yes.
So I'm there, and someone came and took a photo. I don't know if I sent you that one.
No.
And you can see it. It's like, oh my goodness. So she takes my 2 left earrings and my ear, and she's holding it. And I'm just getting a sense of, all right, I don't know where this is going, but
Yeah.
And then she started to hum, because I didn't know any of her story about her health. So she started to hum. And as soon as she started humming, I could tell, you're deaf. I could tell by the tonal quality of her voice.
Yes.
She's deaf. So she hummed for a time, and then she stopped, still hanging on to my ears. And I thought, oh, my turn. So I hummed. She hummed and I hummed for nearly an hour till they came to get me and say, we've got to get back on the bus.
Wow.
In that hour, I did not have one stray thought. There was no thought about, oh, I wonder what vodka I'll try tonight. Wonder what's going to happen when I come home from the tour.
Yeah.
It was just her and I in the most extended present moment that I've ever experienced.
Oh.
And the joy and wonder of that was just profound. And, you know, it just, and of course, she was picking up my vibrations.
Yes, yes.
Through holding her sense of touch, being very, very powerful.
Oh.
And, you know, I got present to my own life in a way I hadn't before. And I got, like, before that, that was about day 4 of the trip, which was 16 days long. Before that, I'm a makeup artist, so each day I had this amazing clown face, and I've got my costume, and I had a puppet, and each day I'm doing the show-off thing with the face. But after that day, I knew all I've got to do is put my nose on. All I have to do is have 2 tiny little dots on my cheek. All I've got to do is have just a little loop on the bottom lip to be that expression. And, you know, everything, Patch had no rules for that experience, other than he said to me when I first organised to go, he said, Pat, don't come because of me. Come because you want to find and spend your clown self. Come because you'd like to experience truly the disparity between rich and poor.
Right.
Come because you might like to make at least one Russian friend.
Mm.
And he orchestrated the tour. In Moscow, we stayed in a minus 5-star hotel. The windows didn't close properly. It was November, temperature -1, -2. Bedding, we're on this little tiny skinny mattress and not enough bedding. And then in St. Petersburg, we were like in an 8-star hotel. This beautiful woman in a ball gown played the harp while we ate breakfast up on this dais. So he created this incredible disparity across all sectors. He didn't want, no way you're going to stay in a 5-star hotel all the way and truly experience what life's really like. And when I came home, I had dinner with some friends, and when I walked into the kitchen, I heard one friend saying to the other, oh, well, I really don't want them to come to my birthday. She's got that new boyfriend and he hasn't got any legs and he really just doesn't fit in.
Oh.
And I thought, have I missed this? And I could have gone, but I chose to stay.
Yeah.
And after a time, we'd finished our meal and everyone said, oh, come on, let's tell us about your trip. And so I said, well, before I do, I'd just like to go back to when I first stepped in tonight and recounted that. And they said, oh, you know, you're just a bit sensitive. You're back in the real world now. And I just really got, no.
Yeah.
The So Patch gave me permission, not with words, just by plopping me into that experience, to have my own experience, not an experience off the side or off the arm of Patch, but, you know, each of us. We all got a badge, and the badge said no whining. So that was the only rule for the whole trip. If you don't like the food, too bad. If you're not happy with your roommate, too bad. Sort it, you know. And every night we'd come together, 36 of us, big circle somewhere in the hotel, and share our day. And it was the saddest, gladdest experience for all of us. To just walk in and out of stark poverty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rammed earth floors, no toilet paper, no hand towels, no light bulbs, impoverished condition, really worn clothes, hideous food, and be present to it all.
Yeah.
Some of those orphanages he's been visiting for 30 years. So children, say from 5 to 16, that's when they need to leave, wait every year for him to come.
Oh, how beautiful is that?
And they paint. So all of us came home with a stack of art from Russian orphans.
Oh, Pat. Wow. Have you got a book? Are you writing about all these adventures? And
Yes. And I'm really seeing it. I have been, for me to tell all of these stories is going to, there'll be some people who'll be upset because the truth will out. And I needed to be in a much more sure place of myself in order to write it without needing, I don't need anything to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I want people to see that happened. This is what I made of it. Sometimes not good. And, you know, this was my unfolding. So that disintegration at the turn of the century and my doctor saying be medicated, I went looking for another way. I went to the grieving seminar at Starship Hospital. I sit next to that couple who broke my heart.
Yeah.
I have a phone call with the magician, like, hello. You know,
that's amazing.
And from that point on, the challenge and support, paradox and synchronicity, even going for a warrant of fitness, created for me yet another story. One time they said, oh, we're going to be an hour and a half. We'll give you a ring, go and have a coffee. So off I go. And because I'm quite short, I've got these beautiful high-heeled sandals on, thinking I'm tall and slim. And by the time I get to the cafe, I've got a blister. So I order the coffee, ask her, has she got a Band-Aid, which she gave me. And I sit down to put the Band-Aid on my offended toe. And there, I look up, and there in front of me is a man holding my shoe like this. And he says, yours, madam? And I'm like, oh, my God, this is him. This is the one. He's dressed all in cream, so handsome. And, you know, he said, so yours, madam? He said, you know, the last time we did this, it was a glass slipper. And I'm like, oh, my God, it is him. It is him.
Wow.
And he says, and you know how that ended, don't you? And then out of the side of my vision came this elegant, perfectly manicured woman's hand, grabbed him by the ear and pulled him off. So it was his wife. And I had to chase them to get my shoe. It wouldn't have happened if I wasn't present.
Yeah.
If I wasn't stepping out in intention. I didn't intend that specific thing, but I set out intentionally.
Yes.
And there are so many of those stories. And of course, behind that is all this time where I was moving through grief and loss, and being able to, life showed me how to travel this time and not be so buffeted.
Yes. And that's when you get that, when you actually get that, and you start seeing how easy things flow. They just flow, and it's just this beautiful unfolding. And up until then we're sort of pushing life a wee bit, aren't we, and fighting with it and struggling through it and all of those things, and then all of a sudden you get it and it's like, oh, peace at last. It's like this absolute peace, and things just flow. It's gorgeous. You have lived such a beautiful, adventurous and very inspirational life, Pat. And just love that sharing. Thank you so much for sharing with us. Is there anything that you would leave? I know you've just so many gold nuggets, but anything that you'd like to say to the viewers for this time now in life? It's very challenging out there for a lot.
Yeah. I think, hard as it might be able to hear, you're here to bring joy, not just into your own lives, but into the lives of others. And I know at the turn of the century, when joyology began, I had no idea what it was going to be. I get the idea, the rest home. Often I'd cry on the way there and cry on the way home because I was still deep in my grief. But I walked in and I was of service. So that nothing beats being of service, and it doesn't have to be a big thing. It's like supporting your neighbour, taking if you're baking scones, taking a couple next door. To serve others allows us to contribute from self. I tell people who aren't happy with their jobs, especially this last few years, identify your signature strengths. Take your top 5 with you, marry them with your job description, and more of you will show up at work, right? It's melded to what you're meant to be doing. You will experience more joy, and people around you are going to say, what happened? And all that's happened is you've decided you're going to bring more of yourself through.
That's beautiful.
Even though, yes, there is this external thing going on and it ain't good. However, with well, I was going to say determination, but I think it's with presence that we can traverse this.
Yes, I believe so too. And intention, you keep mentioning, I know that some people don't agree with the word intention. It's like intention, but it's setting, and I've just done this again with a couple of trips away, long trips, very long, all done in one day to get there and one day to get back, sort of thing, from this end of the island down to the bottom. And I set an intention before leaving both times that it would go with ease and there would be no hold-ups. And there's roadworks right throughout Northland at the moment, from Auckland to Northland, and you are held up a lot on the roads these days for that particular reason. But both ways, it was as if I'd done it in 10 minutes instead of 9.5 hours. It just flowed, and I thought, gosh, more and more now, this energy that we're in right now is showing to be very present, like really present. And the thought in a moment, a second, it's showing up. So definitely set intention for good stuff, for sure. Thank you so much, Pat.
It's
been a beautiful conversation, and I love your heart, how much heart you have, and the joy that you're bringing to this world, for sure, spreading your light everywhere.
And myself, during can I just share this?
Yes.
I have high blood pressure, and I had an episode just couple of months back, late at night, blood pressure's about 230, not good. So calling paramedics, and they got me in the ambulance and getting ready to transport me to hospital. And the girl's sitting opposite me in front of her console, and she's typing. And she says, "Oh, is all that art in your house yours?" And I'm like, "Oh, yes." And off I go about the art.
Yeah.
And she goes, and I said, "What?" She said, "When you started talking about your art, your blood pressure dropped to 120 on 70.
Wow.
Like, no. Anyway, then it went back up. So she's doing whatever she needs to do there still. And she said, "I noticed also there's a framed thing on your sideboard about, I think it's you speaking in New Zealand, and it's got joyologist on it. What's that? Never heard of it." So off I go, of course. And right, blood pressure dropped again, 120 on 70.
Oh.
Now, I've been saying for a long time, I love to speak and I love to paint. When I speak, the lights go on for someone in the room, job done. And then when I paint, I don't need anybody. And that's how I've got through the lockdowns.
Yeah.
I have to orchestrate a bit of speaking, even if it's only a phone call to a friend, and some time in creative pursuit.
Beautiful.
You know, so for the listeners, it's like, you know, do some work in that area because it's profound. It's really good.
It is. And, you know, for sure, when you come in from that space that you do with your creative, you know, it's your soul self. It's your light, your soul self. And in that place, of course, there's no blood pressure. We're all on par. It's all even flow and beautiful, isn't it? It's so lovely. And what, you know, I mean, that's great proof in a sense, isn't it, of when we're in that space of just loving it, that there is no, it doesn't affect our body in a negative way at all. It's a very positive way.
And what a gift from that paramedic. I mean,
absolutely,
she may or may not have known on a conscious level what she did, but it was like another little backhander. When are you going to get it back?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm so pleased you weren't really seriously hurt in any of those accidents you had. That was, you know, that was good going. You're just getting the little nudge. Come on, come on. Yeah. So beautiful. Well, thank you once again, Pat, honestly, and all the very best with the exhibition.
Thank you.
And I'd love to see that. Are you going to be recording? Like, I'm seeing, because you couldn't stand there for 7 days or 3 weeks or whatever and explain to everybody everything, and it have to be recorded. Yeah. Cool. That's really lovely. That's so cool. Well, all the very, very best. Much love to you.
Thank you.
And all you're doing.
And the same right back to you.
Oh, thank you.
Bye for now.
Bye.